Hello and welcome to another episode of Masters of Change. We bring you stories of transformation. We bring you personal encounters of people who have worked on themselves, tried to better themselves. Of course, we all want to do something better in our life. We all want to become a better version of who we were yesterday and who we should become today. But yet, it not appears as easy as it sounds. For some, it has taken years of putting in small and tiny efforts. And some people have transformed overnight. Whether it has taken years or whether it has happened in an instance, that change is very interesting. And to know from their own mouths what their stories have been like would inspire us in the end. Today, we have a story that comes from Gabrielle, and she's joining us from Australia. Let's listen to her story. Gabrielle, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Sri. It's just a delight to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Gabrielle, just so that our friends who are watching you get to know who you are, where you come from, what kind of background you've had, what kind of childhood you've had, just your experience of the entire story of beginning from where you came.
Sure. Well, I was actually born in New Zealand in a rural town about an hour and a half from Auckland, a place called Thames. And that's probably about, 8,000 miles from here, where we are today. So it's very much in the other part of the world. The culture is pretty straightforward. It was a Christian country, so I grew up in a Christian Catholic environment. My mother was a school teacher, my father was a tradesperson, and my mother had a great value for education, actually, and that influenced me hugely. I was one of 5 children, and I was right in the middle, 2 brothers older than me and 2 brothers younger, so I was the only daughter in the family. And I'd say that my mother's a very intelligent, creative, adventurous woman, and that certainly impacted in the way, in terms of my family upbringing. And my father's a very light-hearted kind of person, so it was a childhood surrounded in a natural environment, and that's I think a very lovely blessing to have in your childhood. It's on a coastline, so a lot of engagement with nature, and a lot of appreciation at an early age for nature and the importance of the environment. And within the context of, a religious context, there was a lot of appreciation for things like good manners and contributing to community. And both my parents were big contributors to local communities, as were our neighbours and friends and so on. I think it was around, I went in my secondary school years, I moved to Auckland, and so that's a large city in New Zealand, and I continued on to university from there. That gives you a little bit of context around my immediate upbringing, my family of origin anyway.
The family that we have, the people whom we are surrounded by, they influence us in certain ways, they shape us, they have an impact on us. The value systems, the way that they carry themselves, we learn a great deal from our parents, and especially people who are around us. What kind of value systems did your family bring you through? What did you cultivate as something personal?
Well, looking back, I think I had a very protected upbringing, actually. So my schooling environment was a very protected environment. My secondary schooling environment was again protected. So an all-girls school that I went to, that my mother specifically chose. I feel that the values that, I think perhaps the difference would be that I had 4 brothers and no sisters, and the gender difference is significant. Boys learn in ways that girls tend to learn in other ways, and that's a little bit mixed now. But I think having 4 brothers meant that I had to learn to stick up for myself very quickly, both in terms of, although my parents were very aware of that, and of course, were keen to create balance, but in terms of them not being overprotective, but also just giving me space in the family, and being right in the middle as well. I think I very much love my family of origin. I think I feel very blessed to be born into that family and to be part of that family. So, yes, big influences. I'd say my schooling environment and my community were equally influential. I can still remember my childhood friends, and I still feel that closeness there, even though I'm not in touch with many of them, but still feel that connection and closeness. So I kind of look back on those years, probably up to about 16 or 17, kind of stepped more into my own space of independence, but certainly lovely moments and things that I cherish. And things that now in my years I look back and think, gosh, that's a nice influence from Dad, or that was a nice influence from Mum. So there's nice things happening in that space, continuing, even though my father's left the body and my mum's still alive.
Looking back at life, sometimes we have encountered a moment in our life, or sometime a period in our life, which has made us question things. To look back and ask, what is our purpose here? What would we want to do with our life? For some people, that has also led to a kind of a spiritual quest. There is an inner calling that they wanted to answer. Sometimes people were looking for God. Sometimes people were looking for truth, a sense of justice, just to make a sense of how the world is running. Did that kind of an awakening or a point arrive in your life?
Yes, I was really catching that point, a sense of justice, rather than a quest or a search. I think probably by the time I was 17 or 18, I wasn't really engaged with God at all. As a child, I was. I would talk to God and listen and so on. But by 17, 18, I was far more discerning around who I was listening to and who I was talking to in that context. And I was really, seeing the images or the discourses in front of me around the divine were very patriarchal, and I wasn't accepting of that. I couldn't really perceive the divine to be, this man in the sky, and a lot of disruption in our world is from religious discourses. So I was certainly questioning by that age, but by 18, 19, I wasn't even thinking that way at all. And I had become more involved in social activism, and I was much more concerned about our world. So my mother had instilled a great sense of community responsibility in me, just by her example. So I was a lot more concerned about our world and international things, and so not surprising, at university I studied social sciences and politics and philosophy and subjects like that, and was very involved at university in social activism, in like trying to find a better world, a more just world. I was very aware of racism and sexism and classism and the impacts these have on our ability to really see people for who they are, but also how limiting it is for each one of us. And so it was I probably had not so much a spiritual search there, more of a longing for a better world. And when I finished university, I decided to kind of quit that in a way and start to look at things more creatively. And I moved city and worked as an artist for a while. And it was a quieter search. I was looking more for purpose and meaning rather than a position or concept of God or the divine. It's much more like, and a lot of philosophies I was exposed to, I started to really personally endorse. So I knew that I was more than this body. I knew I was a soul. I I was very accepting of past lives and reincarnation. That just made intuitive sense to me. So I was kind of working in an artistic framework to explore that further. Really, that's probably what I was doing at that point. And really enjoying it too. It was like a lovely gift, really, that to be paid to be an artist and to learn it at the same time. I was working in the area of glass. So, so that was probably more a purpose rather than a search for the divine. But what did happen, to my real surprise, was just before I left Auckland, I came across a pamphlet, and one of my friends had a pamphlet that she'd received in London in Hyde Park that was given to her by an old Indian lady in a white sari. And she'd brought it back to New Zealand with her and she'd shown it to me. And it was saying something like a spiritual organisation led by women. And I thought, I must check that out. And so I had the pamphlet and I took that off to Whangarei, which is a city where there is no centre. And I had another girlfriend with me, and we wrote away for the correspondence book, which didn't really arrive, and so we wrote again, and we got it. And it was such an amazing experience, really, to read this book. It was about this lovely Shiv Baba, not that I knew about the image at the time, but I do remember one evening sitting up and reading it, and of course you're supposed to do one lesson, but I didn't bother. I was so engaged with it. I read the first, and it just made sense. It was about the soul, and then I read about the Supreme Soul, and that made perfect sense. No gender, not this man in the sky, not this ogre, this unbenevolent Jehovah or anything, but someone that a sense of love. So that made a lot of sense. Reincarnation made perfect sense. And then I flicked to the next chapter, and it was about the cycle. And that was like the wow moment, really. Because at university I looked at concepts of time, and I'd never accepted that time was linear and teleological. So that was, and I loved this idea of a better world, like a world naturally about to happen. So that was my big high. I really loved that part.
Because that was also something that you were looking for. You were looking for how to make the world a better place to be.
Through social activism and political activism, yeah. And it was interesting because it's something quite discerning about those moments, because just before I'd left Auckland, another friend had said, look, would you like to come along to this meditation group? And I wasn't that much interested at all. And I'd said, look, I'll go along and accompany you. And, they gave a lovely talk, and there was nothing untoward about the conversation or the talk. But, Shri, what happened was that they put this table up, and it had a white tablecloth, very simple, very elegant, and they put a photograph of this guru, and I can't remember who it was, and they said, please look at him. And so I did. And I can remember this word forming across my forehead, and the word really surprised me. And the word that came in so strongly into my mind was criminal. And I looked at this one, and I thought, I cannot look at him. And so I looked away, and of course being very polite and everything, but I knew that was not for me. I just knew that was not something for me. And yet when I read this book, I absolutely knew it was for me. I thought, this is just so lovely. And it did say, get up early in the morning and meditate. So I actually didn't have an alarm clock, but I woke at 4 o'clock and thought, well, I actually really don't know how you meditate, but let's see what happens. And I think the thing that held me, Shri, was that there was this magnetic subterranean pull that was so compelling, so deeply compelling, that it was mesmerising in a way, but not hypnotic. It was just so deeply engaging and magnetic, and I was just pulled. And so no centre, no teacher, but a lovely book.
Well, this is quite surprising, because for many people would believe that if you would want to come to Raja Yoga or to learn meditation, probably you would have to go to a center, listen and take lessons in meditation. Then probably you might have experience. But for you, these were something happening from reading a book.
Yeah.
What time was it? When did this encounter
This
with the
was
Brahma
the
Kumaris
early
happen?
80s. It would have been late 83, early 84. And there was just such a strong vibration there. And once you kind of picked it up, you really stayed with it. And so, yes, it was that point of knowledge, the clarity of the knowledge, but actually that wouldn't have held me. It was the meditation experiences. Even though, I mean, when I came here, and I had met Daddy G before then, I can remember being in the courtyard with her, and she was like teaching me to meditate. It wasn't a process that we have now, you know, the refined process around how to meditate. We teach it at our retreat centres and so on. It was more experiential. So she'd take you into a stage, and then in minimal English, she would say bodiless or angelic or seed, and she'd take you there. And so I started to navigate the meditative world, the inner world, that way as well. But for me, by far, you're right, Shri, there was no centre.
Yeah.
Later I did connect into one, or very soon after I connected into one, and I had another friend with me, and she was also very involved, became very involved. And look, you know, you find a kindred spirit, don't you? And I think if the divine wants to find you, that one will find you no matter what. And this is a classic example. But I think at that point, I recalled a friend that I knew, and not a close friend, in Auckland, and she had joined this organisation, spiritual organisation led by women, and the Brahma Kumaris, and she was living in the Auckland centre. So there was no email in those days.
Yeah, of course.
You wrote, and she would. So no course. She just started sending Murlis, and that was really how I really learnt the depth of knowledge, was through the Murli. And of course, we'd be getting them from Maraban once every 3 weeks. They'd come wrapped in brown paper with a string, you know, the Indian stamps on it, and then she would on-send. So I was probably reading, myself and another BK friend, we were probably reading Murlis that were 6 weeks old by then. But
the time to write in the post.
The power, you know, like the power of meditation and that vibration was so powerful that little things I noted, like I found myself almost skipping to work, you know, like after some morning meditation, levels of happiness just increased. And it wasn't an outward happiness, it was a very internal one. And I think the only thing I had to change about my lifestyle was to stop eating garlic, which I didn't eat very much of, but everything else was in place. So there was no transition in that sense. And I'd have to say, Shri, it just seemed very natural. It just seemed very natural. And so no big shake. For my parents, a little bit of a shake. But for me, no big shake. It just seemed very natural, actually.
Gabrielle, when you talk about what happened to you of coming to a spiritual journey, many people find that something should move you deeply. That is what brings about a change, because otherwise learning meditation and not being close to a center where you could come and talk to people, but still sustaining your own self, reading and experiencing, would be unbelievable to many people today. That wow, is that possible? How could somebody really have that kind of experience? Just to dwell a little bit upon those aspects, that what kind of experiences did you have? First meditating on your own, then discovering a little bit more about it, and then coming to India here, to Mount Abu. What was that like, and when did you first come here to Mount Abu as well?
Sure. Look, I think you're right. It is unusual, and now, of course, we have Zoom babies.
Yeah.
So it is unusual, but I think it was part of the terrain in those days. I just feel it was. And when I did come to Maraban, the vibration was the same. or the experiences were clearer because Daddy G, as I mentioned, we'd be sitting, we could sit for hours in meditation in those days. Our bodies were younger too and allowed it, but also, and it would feel like, a 2-hour bhatti, an all-night bhatti, it would feel like 10 minutes or something. It would just be so deep. And I think that's part of the sign of the times, whereas now the sign of the spiritual times is a little different. And if I think about my workplace, people come to meditate because they're stressed. No, I wasn't stressed. I was creatively engaged in my artwork. I was looking for more meaning, and I really feel the divine found me and pulled me. And I think I was searching in a way, but it would have been deeply unconscious. But that vibration of those beautiful, pure, very clean, very clear vibrations, and with so much bliss, can't be ignored. They just can't be ignored. They're very present. And I wasn't particularly visual, even though I worked as an artist. It was much more kinesthetic. And I knew these were experiences that I totally believed them. I had full faith in them. I didn't have, I didn't know about India at that point. And indeed, when I was on the plane coming to India, and I was with a sister from the centre then, I was just saying to her, gosh, isn't that amazing the way God's come on? We were just having a chit-chat about that, and she said, well, you're going to meet him. And I said, really? He's still coming? And somehow I hadn't quite grasped that point, that Baba's still coming, that we've still had these avyakt personal meetings. So, and all I thought was, well, I'm pleased I packed a sari. But of course we stitched our own clothes to come, like we had to stitch our Punjabis and make them because this is New Zealand, or even Australia, not available, But I really feel, Shri, that it was just a different part in the drama of things, and that the way we were being called into a spiritual lifestyle was more vibrationally than anything else, and my good fortune about the correspondence book, which I loved, and the language was so different. I remember reading, in Prajapata Brahma, the father of humanity left his mortal coil. Now I'm very young. English is my only language, not just my first language, and this is in English. And so I'm thinking, oh, he died. But I love this language, and I loved some of the images in it. It just deeply resonated. So, yes, it might sound now like it's unusual. It might sound like it's very unusual for a Zoom baby, but that was part of the terrain. It was part of the initiation process. And that's what happened.
Gabrielle, to begin your spiritual journey at a point when, as young as people are, and they have an open eye to explore and to find things for oneself. You have walked a great distance on your spiritual journey. What kind of changes did you see happen to you in your life after becoming a meditator? And now when you look back upon, what efforts did you really make to make those changes, or some changes that you had to make?
Yeah, it's a lovely question, Sri. It's there's ebbs and flows in a spiritual journey, and now I'm over 60 now, so it's been my entire adult life, really. And I don't think of it as a spiritual journey, I just think of it as my life, really. And change, I think there's those daily changes that you don't even notice, but work colleagues would notice, or family might notice. Although I've lived in centres, I don't live with my Lockett family. But I think the first things that I can recall getting feedback from was people would notice how calm I was. So I can remember sitting in a car once, this is in a work environment, and there were two CEOs in front, and we were about to do something, and I'm in the middle, in the back, and people are saying, "Where's Gabrielle?" And I'm just sitting quiet. Where's Gabrielle? I'm here. Things like this. And it was just this, the quietness of the vibration, I guess. I'm just sitting there quietly. So that would have been a change, because my energy before would have been very active. I come from a background of community involvement, and I'm still very involved in community internationally, something that I love and cherish about the Brahmin family. But these sorts of changes, it was like, your state of mind changes, your thoughts slow down. There's a place that's, you come to know that inner terrain so well and just thirst for it, so highly motivated to stay in that inner space when I'm engaged. And that's one of the things that I love about this form of meditation. It's open-eyed, changing my consciousness so that my framework for interpreting and perceiving the world comes from a place of, yes, the Brahma Kumaris soul-conscious space with a huge body of spiritual knowledge. And I think that allows me to bring a depth to conversations in the workplace that have been so well regarded. There's times now where the CEO will say, we just want you in the room. And Bubbers, the divine's at work, because whenever I've had to move to a city, and we work and live in centres or Shakti Bhavans or whatever in the West, well, certainly in Australia and New Zealand, and so you're always balancing being able to finance a centre and have enough time to do service, yeah? And I've always just said to Baba, that's your job. You have to look after that. And I remember I was moving from Christchurch into Wellington to start a centre right in Wellington. And I just gave it to Baba. And this has happened all the time. Got offered 3 jobs. Which one do I want? And so I chose the one that was agreeable to me working part-time, So I feel that when you just... the benefits that you give to a workplace and the feedback that you get show you that you're changing. But I think there's something else that happens, is that in my workplaces, and I work in social development, so I've worked in health contexts, I've worked in youth justice, I've worked in large local councils. So always a situation where you're serving people one way or another. I don't think Baba would ever want me in a corporate situation. I don't think I'd manage that well, and he's never put me there. So it's meant that I feel in my workplace I'm contributing in terms of outcome, but as well as to who I'm working with. And I know that Daddy Janki has said several times, that is service. It's not just giving a course or facilitating retreats, which we also do, which I'm also involved in, but actually there's a lot of service there. And Shri, one thing that I've come to see is that all of my colleagues in the several different ministries where I've been senior advisors or whatever role I've been playing, I feel like they are my clan. I absolutely feel like I know these souls, and there's been and I feel like I've connected with them. And so a lot of them have done the course, and some haven't. But I know that from and I look at their sense of values, and I know that from the Copper Age, at least, that we will share our paths. And so it's a lovely. It's not just about, well, you need money for the centre, so go out and work. It's about it's access. I feel I'm connecting with my clan, and it gives great access to people of influence that you just wouldn't have if you weren't in a work or community environment. So there's that thing around, there's benefit in whatever situation you're in, and wherever drama places you, well, that's where you're meant to be.
Wonderful, Gabriel. When we listen to such stories of people who have worked on transformation, change in such simple ways of making day-to-day changes in their lives, and that has brought them where they are today.
Yes.
And that itself is such a huge inspiration, sending out this message to people that we all can bring about a change if we would like to. It might not be a magical wonder that should happen in one night, but slowly, little by little, adding that bit by bit to who we should become and how better off we could be is really amazing. And how you said that people around you will notice that change. They would see those things happening. There are more questions that I would like to ask, but
Sure.
the clock says that we have to wind up here. But I'm pretty sure the next time, and whenever the opportunity permits, we would get to listen to more stories and more finer aspects of how your spiritual journey, your spiritual life has been, and draw inspirations from that. Thank you so much for coming in today and sharing so much of your own personal and intimate stories to our friends here.
Thank you, Shri. Lovely. Shanti.
Thank you. Friends, that was this episode of Masters of Change. When we listen to each and every person's story, there is so much that we can take for ourselves. Gabrielle's story of about making changes in one's own life, becoming a natural course of action, becoming a meditator, appreciating the value of things. And when you change, when you become a meditator, you would see it happening to you as well. People would just want you into the room and they would say, yeah, your presence makes a big difference. Sometimes we might not be saying something, doing something, but just by our beings, we influence. And that being is what really matters. That is all on this episode of Change. I will see you again. Until then, take care.